Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Once again, we are here. We'll find out what we're doing. Maybe one day. Here with Old Man Winners, Adam. I'm Joe Gould.
I s-
And eventually, we're going to talk about the Revenge of Frankenstein from 1958.
yeah, I wasn't quite clear what the revenge was all about. It's mentioned
He
in the
had one
movie, but
line.
yeah,
He had one line in the movie, and I thought to myself, I need to ask Adam, do you think they came up with the name of the movie before or after the dialogue was written? And did they write the dialogue just to satisfy the title?
yeah, I think the title came first. That's my working assumption here.
Yeah, I think it did too. Matter of fact, I think they pre-sold the movie based on what I read. They made a poster, flew to America, got it approved, then came back, said, "Okay, you got 6 weeks to write a movie."
To the director, they said this, right?
Something like that. It was
Or
one of them.
oh yeah, so I
Yeah, I'm not
forget
sure.
the name of the writer, but the director was the same as the first movie, Terrence Fisher. Did I say that right?
I think it was mostly the same team,
Mm-hmm.
actually. But prior to that, Adam, how was your Mother's Day? Were you celebrated?
Well, I didn't go out to eat, which means I didn't have to wait in line and I didn't have to spend time in a restaurant waiting on waiters to refill my drink. My own mother, believe it or not, went to KFC yesterday. Um, that was their big Mother's Day meal. They did it because they were on a road trip to visit some family sites in a different county. So a little bit of a larger story there, but they wanted a quick meal and they got Kentucky Fried Chicken. So how about that for a Mother's Day special?
That's hilarious. It is. It is quite. I find it humorous when I think about the fact that the people from our previous generation like all these disgusting restaurants, and they would
I
say the
like
same thing
KFC
about us.
too.
Like, why did these? I haven't. I
No,
don't think I've been in a clean KFC in 15 years.
there's a lot of truth to that, and again, I like Long John Silver's, but for whatever reason, it has one of the reputations of being, oh my gosh. Now, I want to tell a little bit of story about Colonel Sanders, of course, because one of his vices throughout most of his life was foul language, and it was bound up with a raging temper. And it seems like one of the things that really set this guy off would be when he would walk into the franchise KFC stores, probably after he sold the company and he was the ambassador, and he would eat that food and he would just be enraged at everything about that was wrong with these restaurants. Just fly into tantrums and cussing up the wazoo. So Colonel Sanders himself had an issue with the way his legacy was being handled.
I knew I liked the guy. So you're saying that he may have changed some of the letters in the KFC, the meaning post sell.
Well, he came to religion later in life, and part of the appeal was the idea that Christ could help him with his cussing. So I did a little bit of an article on that years ago. But regardless of
Okay.
anything else you think about the guy, he at least tried to rein that in there in his later years. So
Back to Mother's Day. So we went out to see some of Emily's family, not her parents, but her grandparents, out in Chapel Hill. And we had been out in the yard for 2 minutes, and I saw a black tick on our cooler, and I said, "Oh, this could get complicated later." And then we were out there with some lawn chairs for a couple hours.
uh-huh.
Came back, got everybody out there, to change your clothes, put them in the laundry. We're gonna wash
Yeah.
this stuff in it real quick.
Uh-huh.
And then about 4 or 5 hours later, I've already showered at this point. I look down and there's a red dog tick on my arm. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. I am not wired for ticks. As a kid, I was. As an adult, I worked very hard to make sure there's no living organisms on my property other than children and dogs. And so I spent, see here, half the day. I vacuumed all the floors. I sent the robot around to clean up behind me.
Hmm.
I think I did 8 loads of laundry, washed all the bedding, and inspected the lawn chairs because I hadn't put them in the garage. That's probably honestly where I failed. But I am relatively certain that we are a tick-free community today at the White House in Mount Juliet.
I have a little bit of childhood
I don't.
trauma related to ticks. I think when I was very, very young, I remember getting one apparently stuck in my belly button hole and having to go to the doctor to try
I
and
thought you
get
were
it.
gonna go somewhere else there.
No, the belly button hole. Come on now. I have an innie, not an outie,
About to
like those
say.
weird people. I got an innie belly button, and I don't know where he got it out, but it was more of the trauma to think it was going to be inside me forever. Like I was going to be my own Hammer horror film or something.
Well, you can't be too careful these days. I'm not sure what happened in the last 20 years, but you know how people talk about the diabetes and the bread and the sugar and all the things that kill you, right? Well, now you
Gosh,
have
I
the
love
Lyme
bread too.
disease. I know.
That'll
But
kill
now it's
you
like,
quicker than. Yeah, that'll kill
I'm
you quicker.
pretty sure that, like, this is not scientific, but based off of anecdotal evidence on reading the internet, very reliable source, I'm pretty confident at least 98% of ticks have Lyme disease at this point.
It feels that way just based on what you read online. Do you think they came over from
And
China?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that the Lyme disease, what it does is it makes everyone lactose intolerant. It makes you have to be gluten free or something. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't remember many people being widespread glucose. We can't pronounce the word today. They couldn't do they couldn't do their gluten. The gluten, yeah, they couldn't do gluten. I don't remember a whole lot of that.
People, Adam, to be fair, people have been working on their glutes for a long, long time.
That's what I need. I sit around too much. I sort of atrophy. There's a medical term for that.
Yeah, you have to eat more peanut butter.
I eat a lot of peanut butter, but I don't know if it I think it goes to my shoulders these days. So the peanut butter, I do love it. Doctor will probably tell me to lay off it this month when I go talk to him, but we'll see. We don't all have the advantage of growing a body in the lab and transferring our brain into it. We only got the one we got.
And with that segue, we have The Revenge of Frankenstein.
Yes.
Adam, I like this movie.
I think it's overall better than The Curse of Frankenstein. You might fight me on that.
I think it's a lot different. I don't think you can't have this movie without The Curse of Frankenstein. I will say that.
No, but it follows. I feel like if somebody just did a one-shot Frankenstein movie, like a lot of films have done, you just sort of assume the original story, and you jump to the idea of the Baron hiding out under a new name. I think that works okay.
No, I agree. So the movie starts with a soft retcon, as I would put it. Do you agree?
Yeah.
All right, so the part that I'm not really sure why, the previous movie ended at nighttime, and this looks like it's the middle of the day in terms of the lighting. So I'm not really sure why they did that.
That's a little bit of George Lucasism.
So there were some scrolling credits at the beginning, and basically it says, in the year 1860, Baron Frankenstein was condemned to death for the brutal murders committed by the monster he had created, ... which is not how the first movie ended.
Well, let me at least defend that one point. If you just have that by itself, you could reconcile that. Because he is condemned for the murders that came about by the creature he created. It just doesn't seem to necessitate that everybody knew about the creature. So, the last film ended with him condemned for at least one murder. Maybe more.
I think it was one murder, and again, it went on to say that basically the entire country was relieved that this it didn't work, and I'm not really sure why they needed to. They could have had rumors of this creature. They never had the creature in the first movie; like they never found it, right? Just his
went into the acid
crazy
vat, so far as I understood.
Yeah, and they didn't believe him that he had one, which is why they condemned him to death for the murder. So, they could have worked that in. They could have said he was a crazy man who claimed to have made a beast. I think it still would have worked.
Yeah, and that we'll see later in the movie, there are geographical retcons as well. this movie, Curse of Frankenstein, was said to open somewhere in Switzerland, in the Baron's family castle. This movie, at various points, makes it sound like it all took place in Germany. But, oh.
Yeah. And I know in the next movie they will go to the castle again, and I can't recall, because it's been quite a while since I've seen it, where that country is.
It's been a while
But we'll find
since
out
I've seen it. But I was thinking it was in Germany, too.
Yeah, it gets looser.
Yeah.
The other thing I couldn't figure out for this movie, and I looked quite a bit, is I really got no feel for the box office this thing. My understanding is it made money, but the only statistic I could find was about 450,000 admissions in France, which is not the country or the number that I was really interested in.
I read somewhere in America this was screened as a double feature with Curse of the Demon, which I've not seen. And so it may have been harder to specify this film in particular when you're bundling movies as double features.
True. But I just, like I said, it got approved in America. My understanding is it was not a failure. I'm sure the budget wasn't that much. But no records I could find right now on the box office. And as a general gripe, I don't understand why it's so hard to find old box office information. Like,
so
if
this
you find
movie
it for
was
some movies, I feel like you'd have it for all of it. Like,
so this was 1958 on Revenge, and Curse was 57. Is that?
yeah, I don't understand that either. Unless Curse of the Demon was a re-release. That was commonly
No,
done.
sorry, Curse of Frankenstein, not Curse of the Demon. But they didn't make another Frankenstein film until about 1963 or 64, so a little bit of gap between these Franken sequels.
Yeah, I will say Curse of the Demon does look like it was released in 57. So it works both ways, however you said it. But yeah, I don't know. It's odd. It was a good movie though, so I can't imagine that. Everything I saw was it was pretty well received. People liked production values. They liked at this point they're getting used to color in the horror movies, and they liked the plot. It was a good movie. Like it really was well done.
The set pieces on this movie are a lot more ambitious. We'll just talk about the laboratory scene. It's a lot bigger set in this movie than it looked to be in the previous one. Not that the previous movie was bad, but this one just feels a lot bigger when they're down there walking around.
Related to that, but not entirely, do you think that they kind of made this plot around the ideal human so as to show more of the monster without having to have any real practical effects for the monster? It works, but I do wonder what was the motivating factor. The budget that they had, or the idea.
Or the actors they hired to play, and maybe they just liked the way a certain actor had to look.
So the Frankenstein's monster is basically their version of Igor, named Carl. We can call him Kigor if we want. And he's got some kind of deformity where his eye squints, his shoulders seems jacked up with a wonky hand and a limp.
Paralysis.
So all of his limbs, something like, is that what they called it?
Yeah, paralysis due to a blood clot that apparently was near the brain. That was a point of discussion between Hans and Victor. Now,
okay,
the end of this movie only credits the actor as playing the dwarf. I never really thought he had any dwarf-like tendencies. I'm wondering why they didn't just call him the Hunchback.
I missed that. I think they should have just called him Kigor. But
just as a note, Igor does not enter the Universal films until the third Frankenstein movie. Did you know that?
I couldn't remember on that one.
He was not in the original 1 or 2. There was a Hunchback, but not Igor.
Speaking of Kigor, Carl, when he was the deformed version, the little man, so to speak, I'm not sure how short he actually was, but because he hunched around, he was pretty short. I didn't feel like his voice matched his mouth. And I felt like they were dubbing over the later actor when he got the new body. But I'm not entirely sure. Did you have any thoughts on that? Or notice it, for that matter?
It didn't strike me near as weird as anything in King Kong Escapes, so I never paid much attention to it. Poor
Well,
old,
I didn't notice it the first time I watched it. I did notice it today, so it'd been the second time in about 3 months. But
poor old little Carl. He doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, all things considered. He's kind of
no.
gone after a while.
So we'll do some broad strokes on this plot. It's not really a complicated plot. So we speak of Frankenstein is at the guillotine, and apparently some off-camera deal has been made
Yeah.
where I'm not sure what the role would be. He would be what the guy leading him to the death, so to speak.
Yep.
There's a deal made. I'm assuming the guy swinging the guillotine, or controlling the guillotine's in on the deal, but they
Yep.
kill the priest instead of Frankenstein. And then
Clever
later,
devils.
yeah, these two drunks in a bar get together, and one of them gets the other one to get in on a deal where they want to basically steal Frankenstein's body for 10 somethings. What was it? 10 marks. Not sure what the currency equivalent of that is.
Or inflation rate.
Yeah. And then they're quickly digging up the grave. It's funny that the skinny guy gets the fat guy to do all the work. He says, why do I gotta do all the work? Because I got a bad heart. And then you're thinking, that's a joke. Yeah. And then Frankenstein shows up. He has a horror. Sorry, they actually do look in the grave. I should read back up. They look in the grave. They realize it's a priest. Apparently, that is a big no-no.
Yeah.
Grave robbing a priest.
Yep.
So the fat guy runs off.
Thought you're getting a baron.
Yeah. The fat guy runs off. The skinny guy thinks about it. Then he says, well, the only difference is a hat. I can deal with that. So he goes back to get the body. Then Frankenstein and Kigor show up. And he has a legit heart attack, and falls into the grave. It's not really clear why Frankenstein shows up.
Boy, it's a great entrance, though.
Absolutely.
It's a Dracula-style entrance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he was just showing up to see, if the grave had been completed, I guess. I don't know.
He didn't want anybody looking in.
The grave. Yeah, so, and also, I will say, I guess they leave the body in there, but we'll find later on that they only ever find the priest. So I'm not sure where the guy with the heart attack went.
I assume they buried him just in the ground there, somewhere next to the coffin. Are you at all curious why Baron Frankenstein was not buried in the family tomb of Frankenstein?
Well, I would assume it's another plot hole.
Well, I know he was condemned, but you would have thought maybe a deal could have been worked out. The Baron, if he's already cutting deals in prison, it would have made a lot more sense for his coffin to go back to his own, a place where he could still have some control over it. Oh, well.
Yeah. Loose sequel, what can we say?
Yeah.
And then we pops up in a new city. I forget the name of it, but it was not English.
Oh, I got it right here. I'll pronounce it. Karlsruhe in Germany.
Karlsruhe, yes. Yeah. And we got a medical council meeting, and it sounds like this Dr. Stein character has been there for 3 years, taking all their patients, and doesn't want to play with them.
They're expensive patients. They're high-priced patients. That's what they're upset about.
Yes, though we don't ever see but one of those. All we see is all the charity work he's doing for the local church.
Yeah, the hospital, which I guess at that time would have been under some of the ecclesial body there, because the what's the word? The minister's daughter, Miss Cardinal? No, not what's the word I'm thinking of?
The Bond girl, I think.
That's right. She was the first James Bond girl from Dr. No and whatever the second Bond movie was.
Yes. So the council, after a lot of argument and discussion, they decide to send 3 people to go visit him. Kind of anticlimactic, but
One of the guys is very intentional that he wants to end up, who suggested the idea. He wants to be on that, Mr. Hans Cleaver.
Yes.
Seems like a pun in there. I'm not sure about that. Hans Cleaver. Cleaver, yeah. Like a cut cleave.
Anyway, so they go and they meet his janitor, Ernest. and
Is that the name of the
they got
janitor?
no, but it's who he reminded me of. Remember that one Ernest
Ernest.
movie where you have like the evil clone or the evil twin or whatever it was?
Oh, Ernest goes to jail. Okay.
Yeah, he reminds me of the Ernest from jail.
Well, let's specify our janitors. Are we talking about the janitor in the hospital or right above the laboratory?
Ah, the hospital. I didn't quite
Okay,
understand the one at the laboratory, how that one worked.
I
But
looked up
yeah.
the cast list. He's listed as the up patient at the hospital, who's a bit of a devious guy, who's a tattler. So he is officially an up patient, as in he was a current patient who's not bedbound, but he does a lot of work as a janitor, is what it sounds like.
Well, it sounds like he's paid because they kept saying you need to move that broom, but you wouldn't be so
Yeah.
told.
Yeah, Hans does that, I think. And then,
So, anyways,
yeah.
they meet Ernest, and Ernest tells him that hey, the council's here, and he says, "Well, have him wait in the ward while I'm doing surgery." So they get to see him interact with the sick people. And he basically rejects him. He says, "Why should I be working with you guys? I seem to be doing pretty well for myself. I have a
He
janitor."
is. And he slights them, too. He says, 3 years ago, it seems to me the medical council only exists in order to stifle out competition. So sticking it to him. This is our anti-hero
Yeah.
now, Dr. Baron von Frank.
No, not Frank Stein.
Oh, not
You're
Frank
jumping.
Stein?
You're jumping ahead.
Should have gotten my...
You're jumping ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Stein, sorry.
So then he's confronted by one of the people there later on who sneaks into his lab, or at least his room. Hans. And
Boy, I love the
he
dialogue
Franzes.
between him in that scene.
Yeah, I didn't write any of it down, but it was good.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Well, I wrote a little bit down. I take that back. And he says he wants knowledge, and they kind of. It's one of those things where like they're a little afraid of getting double crossed each, but they agree to agree. And he says, "Okay, let me finish my chicken, and we'll go show you the lab
And the cheese. Gotta cut that cheese.
and the cheese." Yeah.
I mean, the dialogue is so excellently laid out there. So Hans is sitting there like a creepy cowboy in the dark as Victor cuts his chicken. And Hans says, "A masterly dissection, Dr. Stein. You must forgive this intrusion." Victor says, "Must I?" Then they go through the whole bit about the deaths of Professor, is it Bernstein from the murder that he probably should have been guilty of and condemned for in the previous movie. So he's a former student of Bernie Stein there, and
Bernie Sanderstein.
Yes, Bernie Sanderstein. Now then they're having that dialogue about will they trust each other, betray him, and Hans gives that whole spiel about, he wants to learn from the greatest surgeon and medical mind that ever existed. And I'm a little bit curious what reputation the late Victor Frankenstein would have had as an actual surgeon, what credentials he actually would have done. But then there's a line of Victor says, "Uncertainty is part of life's fascination, isn't it?" I just kind of like that. He's happy to live with the uncertainty. Yeah, they go down the steps. When they eventually go to the laboratory, Han stumbles. Victor catches him. He says, "Careful. It'd be a pity to lose you so soon."
Soon. That scene, I really wonder. That's the kind of scene that can be an ad lib. Like someone stumbles on the step and they get the take of him making the pun. And Cushing is obviously, Cushing is, he's smart enough. He can come up with that. So I'm curious on that one, whether or not it's kind of an odd scene to write that way.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
You gotta make somebody
I
stumble
like it,
on.
but it screams ad lib.
They keep you guessing as to whether Victor wants to kill this guy or not.
Yeah, in the last movie, they had things where you kind of felt that was going to happen. He's going to take out his assistant, but they didn't really acknowledge the fact that it felt that way. In this movie, they go all in. There's multiple lines about that.
Even though Victor never turns on him. That's another interesting part of this dynamic in this movie. Nobody ever betrays the other.
Yeah, Victor Frankenstein's a very loyal individual. And even when his creatures keep going AWOL, like, he never turns on the creature.
That's true.
And he'll
He
yell at his
never regrets
colleague,
it.
but he never actually acts out at him.
Yeah.
He's not
That's
full
true.
heel. Not full heel.
Well, as he
He's a tweener.
said, he's a difficult man to work for. Most great men are.
Yes, I was. Yes. All right. So they go in the lab, and he shows this old contraption that he keeps around to remind him of the old days, with a brain, or a fake brain, a hand, and an eye. And I assume for 1958, this was pretty cool looking stuff, but it didn't age great.
Well, it's good that he keeps it under wraps, and we don't have to worry about it again. But it's not a computer brain. How did you interpret the brain? Is it a chemistry set brain?
I interpreted it as a copper teapot of some sort, but I don't know.
Yeah, because he makes a big deal, said this is the brain, this is the eyes, this is the hand, and he's going to test its nervous system, nerve reaction with fire, but he's not terribly proud of it. Hans is amazed. He said, I've never seen anything like this. Victor says, have you? No, I guess not. So you just wondered what kind of the backstory would have not been there.
Yeah. Well, he's thinking that he had already created that creature, I think. But yeah.
So then they get to look at the creature. The
creature Michael Gwynn, who I did confirm was not from the Munsters. I couldn't remember that guy's. I think it was Frank. But
oh, okay. It's a very the reveal of the monster, who at this point is just the empty shell of a man. It reminds me a lot of the AI generated Super Panavision 70 videos I watch on YouTube. Just something about that, the reveal.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming for modern audiences. I don't know how they took it back in 58. There's nothing particularly scary. He does seem very tall.
And I think the movie is trying to build up Victor as having improved upon everything. That he's improved upon the body because he doesn't have to go scratching around under the black market to buy spare parts. He doesn't have to pull people down off the hanging gallows. He can just work and volunteer at this poor mission. And when he decides he wants to amputate a human limb, he gonna amputate a human limb, and he gonna take it home with him. Do whatever he wants to with it.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, your arm's gonna kill you. What do you mean? It's like, oh, it is. Just trust me, you're fine.
Those are some great scenes, too, when he's talking to the patients in the ward when the science committee's reviewing him. He said, what's this man's profession? And I guess the male nurse, whatever it is, says, a pickpocket. Victor says, you'll have to find another trade, or at least use the other arm. And he turns to the guy behind him, and he says, hey, Doc, my throat is killing me. And Victor says, well, no wonder. You treat it like a furnace anyway. So it's like, these people sure are dirty. They say it keeps them warm, but good old Victor, man. He's letting them have it.
Yeah. So Victor tells Hans that the one thing you can't take from a dead body is the brain. You gotta get the live brain. He learned that the hard way.
He believes his previous experiment would have succeeded if he but had the brain. If he only had the brain.
Yes. And they make an allusion to the fact that his former colleague damaged it, so it wasn't really his fault. But they do change it a little bit, because it still wouldn't have worked using his current logic. It would have been dead for a while.
Oh, exactly. That hit me. He has this big old speech of why he needed a living brain. Unlike the limbs, life cannot be restored once it is gone and the brain is life. But Dr. Bernstein, even though Victor set the whole thing up, I'm guessing we're looking at least a week to have that funeral done for all the people to travel from the university over to the Baron's castle in Switzerland or wherever it was really at. Yeah, that brain would have undergone some. Yeah.
Yeah. And you could probably work out that little retcon we learn later about him working on the animals. Maybe he learned the second part later. It can't just be undamaged, but it's got to be fresh.
Fair enough.
But it still doesn't quite. You can't work out all the wrinkles.
No.
And then he says, "Well, that'd be murder, wouldn't it? You have to get a fresh brain. Who's gonna volunteer
Not
for that?"
necessarily. See, he's bending the moral rules
of Carl
here.
/ Kigor. So we get Kigor.
Who's very happy to volunteer. I love the line about the volunteer. He says, "Oh, I have a volunteer. He's right here in this laboratory with us." And then you have the visual acting of Hans looking over at him.
It's like, "Oh, not you. You're way too valuable right now.
Your brain is too valuable where it is."
And then he kind of explains that, Carl, even though he has all the defects, that he's thoroughly examined him, though I don't know how you would have checked off the brain. And he decided that the brain is not the cause of the handicap.
Blood clot.
Yeah.
Which apparently you can fix when you remove a brain. I guess you deattach it. I guess you get rid of the blood clot.
I guess. Which that'll end up being a bigger plot hole later. But,
Fair enough. But it's something Victor hasn't learned yet, I guess.
So then we get a lady visit the lab.
Margaret Conrad or something like that.
I call her Bond Girl. So the Bond Girl shows up, says her daddy's the minister, she's going to work there. And I don't care if Frankenstein told you or Stein told you or not. It's true. And he says, okay.
She said Dr. Stein has been informed, is the way she put it.
Yeah. And what we later find out...
I've been in his position before. I've been informed after the fact.
And we later find out that the reason he was informed was her daddy's the minister, and Stein's basically like, I can't really do this if I get kicked out of this place. So, got to deal with it. Got to deal with it. These meddling ladies.
He recommends that what she try to give one of the guys a bass. What'd she say? She tried to think of something to scare her out of the idea of working in the mission for longer, but I do like Hans's comment when he's meeting with Margaret, and she says, "Oh, I'm here to shop for the men, get them tobacco, soap, ink." And Hans replies, "Oh, these men rarely bathe and they never write." So I guess the tobacco would have been in popular supply, though.
As we found out it was. And the only other noticeable thing here is Carl pops in for a second, and we can tell he likes the girl.
Oh, yes, but she reaches out with that right hand to shake his right hand, and unfortunately, it was a cause of embarrassment for both of them.
So then when we pretty much pop into the thing where they do the deed.
Yeah, pretty clean. Should we mention Otto the chimpanzee?
Oh, I got notes on to Otto. I haven't mentioned anything yet.
Oh, you get to it when you want to, then.
Yeah, right now we just know there's a monkey.
Yeah.
I don't think we even know the big twist on the monkey yet. I think we just have a
monkey.
Nope,
that comes later when Hans is at the mission talking to Ernest P. Janitor.
They take Carl's brain out. He is a little nervous when he sees the sharp tools, but they just tell him to look at his new body and focus on that.
Eyes on the prize, Carl.
They take his brain out, which they don't handle all that gingerly, and plopping it in the vat.
Live brain on the floor.
Yeah. And then they take maybe 2 tablespoons of embalming fluid to keep his body fresh. Very underwhelming amount. I always pictured more of that was used in real life. I don't know. But we do get that familiar humming from the first movie as they bring the new body to life.
The wheel is back. It's nice to see.
So, yeah. They brought a lot of stuff over. And this is where we first see the monkey. He is antsy in anticipation. He is watching this movie and enjoying it. He's getting ready he's getting ready for his podcast. He's excited.
Man, he could eat a horse.
Yeah. And then the body starts convulsing. The monkey goes nuts. And they sedate him.
The monkey or the body?
And then... they don't sedate the monkey.
Are we going to call new Carl? What are we going to call new Carl? Is he going to be the creature? Super Carl? Carl
I'm still good
Fawn.
with Kigor.
Really? The monster version? Okay.
I mean, I'm good either way.
All
Whatever
right.
flows. Whatever flows. They don't really
I do
name him in
like
the
this
movie.
movie's twist on making the Hunchback into the actual monster. Might have been the first one to try that.
So they decide that he will need a few days to rest as his brain adjusts in the new body. They take him to the hospital, but he's seen by Ernest. Evil Ernest
Yep.
sees them. Not quite sure what they're not. He's not sure what they're doing, but he's gonna keep it in the back of his mind for later.
Supposedly he owns all the keys to the building, which seems to me a strategic mistake for Dr. Frankenstein to trust this guy with that much authority.
Well, I think he had. I think that key was separate though. What that he needed the master key because later when he snuck around and got it, he was being all sneaky.
You might be right. And again, Frankenstein doesn't run that poor hospital. He's working there, but it's not his place either.
Right. So then they bring the guy around the next day or a week later, I think it was actually, and they basically say, "Look, buddy, it's all gonna be fine. You just need to relax. Here's a chill pill."
Yeah.
And Stein goes to work and tells Hans, "Just don't freak the guy out. Talk to him
Oh
a
boy.
little bit."
Oh boy.
So what's the first thing he
This.
does? He freaks him out.
Oh. We're gonna make you into a sideshow, buddy. We're gonna make you into the medical journals. We're gonna parade you around into the before and after. We're gonna get you into commercials. Now, I don't know. Maybe Carl would have been up for that, being a minor celebrity, but he's not up for the idea of being paraded next to his old corpse for everybody to see. Because, as he puts it, people have been staring at me my whole life. I was hoping to have a normal existence.
Yeah. It's like, I just want to go find that pretty girl. I
Yeah.
want to go find the Bond girl. I'm tall enough
Take
for her.
Margaret out onto the town.
So he leaves, and Kigor's creature takes a rest. And we get Ernest, extra creepy like, showing the Bond girl around.
Wants
Yeah,
tobacco,
he wants some tobacco,
not the girl. I thought he wanted the girl. He just wanted the tobacco.
Ernest never struck me as one who was hanging out with the girls, but then he shows her where Carl is, and he gets the key or finds the key and stuff. And then she goes to see him. And while she's talking to Carl, Ernest and Hans have a very deep discussion about fleas and animal hygiene.
It went a lot further than I expected it to. Again, it goes back to that never bathing idea. That's what kicked it off, I think. And the janitor duties, he wasn't sweeping. Yeah. And he said that the animals get along just fine without doing that.
Yeah, a monkey gets hungry, just puts his arm out, grabs a banana, eats the banana.
Don't eat no meat.
At some point, we get to don't eat no meat, which makes Hans think, wait a second, Otto eats meat.
This is his This is his Adrian Monk moment. Dun dun dun. He was.
So he runs out of there. He charges out, lets Ernest drink the rest of the coffee whiskey.
Must be so bad. I mean, coffee and whiskey, two stuff I'd never want to drink. I can't imagine mixing them both together.
It's acquired taste. So anyways, he goes and he confronts Stein. He says, "Wait a second, what's up with Otto?" And says, "Oh, Otto, he's a cannibal." I can't believe I didn't remember to tell you that.
Sorry. He ate his wife.
Yeah, he ate his wife. And here's where we find out that in his earlier experiments, he started with putting brains of one animal into the brains of another animal. And what he found out was that the brain won and tried to make the new body do the things the brain was used to doing. So that monkey Otto got the brain of an orangutan, and then he ate his wife, which wasn't really his wife because he was an orangutan at that point. And I guess orangutans eat meat. I don't know. I'm confused on that. But at some point,
I have not yet seen the latest Planet of the Apes. Maybe I'll get around to it this week.
Yeah, I mean, some monkeys are pretty violent, so it wouldn't shock me if they ate some meat. But the real gist of what they're getting at, the real gist though, was that the brain, if pushed too hard too soon, can get damaged, and you'll become a cannibal.
Yeah, and apparently Carl understood this.
Yes, and this I don't know if I like the fact that he understood this or not in terms of the
Mm.
movie,
Hmm.
but uh, I do get that it would have been hard to hide that from him since he was the one taking care of the monkey and giving him the flesh to eat after that.
Hmm.
But but still, if I'm Hans, I'm thinking I feel like key information got withheld here. It's like what?
Remember, he's just a student. He's the intern.
And then there's a little Easter egg, which will come into play later. Stein shows Hans that he's got a new
A
suit, so to
project.
speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, new suit's ready for Brain. Got a new body ready.
He's using the arm of the guy, the pickpocket he cut off earlier. He attached that one.
Yes. And I do wonder at this point whether or not, in his mind as a character, the backup plan was already in motion.
He wouldn't put it past him.
Then we go back to Carl, and the girl has seen him. He's played her a little bit, says, I'm hurting so bad. Can you please loosen my straps? And she
This feels like
does.
a nursery rhyme. Something like the Big Bad Wolf would have done something like this.
Yeah. And she also gives him her address and says, hey, when you get out of here, come see me.
Woo,
You seem like
Margaret.
you seem like a real nice crazy creep.
Man, Margaret. You fresh lady there. You know, those preacher kids, as they always say. Yeah, there's something there.
Bond women.
But, yeah, Bond
So
girl.
Carl, so Carl's loose at this point, or Kigor, whatever you want to call him. He gets dressed and sees himself in the mirror. And he's actually pretty impressed with himself.
He's all right. Even with the stitches, he's looking okay.
Yeah.
Moving well.
And
Moving well.
he has to kind of learn how to move the body parts that he formerly couldn't move, but he's working on that. And then he jumps out the window. I'm not sure where the window went, but he didn't
Wouldn't
fall,
it have
so I
been
guess there was some
funny
kind of ledge.
if he'd have broken his arm or his leg the first thing?
If this was so, if this was a Mel Brooks film, that's how it would have happened.
Yeah.
So then he goes back to the laboratory as Stein and Hans leave,
What
and
timing?
yeah, well, I was on purpose. I think, he was waiting. He was out there waiting in the bushes,
That's right.
and then
That's right.
in light of the fact that their plan is to parade him around town with his old body, he says, "Screw that," and he goes to destroy his old body. And I should say, these British people have a very high tolerance to flames.
Mm.
He's up there with this big furnace, basically
Yeah.
in the furnace with the body still in it. I can hardly make a grilled cheese without getting nervous. Like,
And apparently he didn't even get the whole thing inside the furnace because there were articles of clothing that fell out and were still on fire by the time he was done. So you imagine
yeah,
he must have had some hot hands by the time this was
you know how
over.
but everyone's mother or grandmother just seems ability to grab a hot pan out of the oven and not burn themselves. He's got a little bit of that going there.
Mm.
Well, his clothes didn't even catch on fire. But anyways, he's
Yeah.
discovered by another janitor.
Yes.
Who comes
And I'm not
downstairs
sure.
and he looks like a. Go ahead.
I'm not sure how this building works because Victor said the laboratory was a former wine cellar. And I'm wondering if the stuff upstairs, is it like an inn or a bar or something like that?
I don't know. The janitor didn't seem to think that he wasn't supposed to be down there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But he comes down and he looks like some sloppy independent wrestler from the 60s, Hayskoon, or some Haystacks guy. And he starts to want to fight the monkey.
It's very professional wrestling to me. Everything about him in the lab.
Yeah, but not the good kind of professional wrestling. This is the AEW of professional wrestling. But anyways, he starts to fight the monkey with a chair. I don't know what his deal is there. I don't know if he had a few drinks upstairs or what. But then Carl bumps into something and turns some equipment on, and he realizes there is a person in there. And he goes over to Carl, punches him a few times, gives him some CTE, and then it seems as if Carl goes rabid.
Yep.
I
It
can't
struck me
tell if
as
he grew strength or just got comfortable with his strength, but he
hey, hey,
makes pretty quick work of the guy.
didn't the Undertaker do that kind of shtick in his early years?
Oh yeah, yeah, in a much more professional manner though.
All right. He gets to the point where he stands
Yeah,
up and the punches don't hurt him anymore. Direct ones to the face.
yeah, it was a little bit of a mix between the Undertaker and Hulk Hogan there, but yeah,
All right.
he hulked out, sat up, did the Undertaker sit up spot,
Yeah.
then he hulked out. The monkey representing Hulkamania went wild, and then he chokes the guy out. And
Yeah.
again, you kind of wonder, was Carl just timid before and didn't realize his strength or know how to use it, or did he like get rabid and grow like Popeye was, grow some muscles?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He didn't throw the
It was a very
janitor in the furnace,
quick
did he?
turn. No, they found his body. When Stein comes back, they find the body,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he sees the monkey eating meat, and he looks tempted, and he kind of
Oh,
runs
yeah.
away.
Mm.
He didn't want to eat the fat janitor.
Mm.
Might get ticks.
He wanted the fair meat, the white meat, more tender.
Yeah. So then they go back, and Stein and Hans realize that Keegor's got away, and he's pissed off at Hans, and especially when he
Yeah.
finds out that he told him about the plan. He's like, "What? Why would you do that?"
It's
He's got to think.
interesting
He's
logic
got to be
on
thinking,
Victor's
"Why
part
am I surrounded by idiots? Why am I surrounded by idiots?" That's the way he looks.
because he seems to know he needs to ask the why for what happened, and that's how he's able to dig the information out of Hans there. Very interesting logic for Dr. Stein.
So then we see that the monster has run. He's found the girl because he had the address, and this is a educated monster who can find his way around town.
In the barn,
And
in the country, it sounds
and
like.
yeah. So he's hiding in the barn. Then she finds him, and she's like, "We need to get help." He's like, "Don't tell Stein." She says, "Okay, I'll go tell his friend."
Yeah, sure.
So he's got a damaged brain from the fight, starting to get some cannibalistic tendencies, and then suddenly in the barn, his body reverts,
Yeah,
and the paralysis rehappens, and his eye doesn't shut quite yet, but eventually his eye shuts, and his arm goes wonky, and he's got to drag the leg, and he is thoroughly demoralized at this point. And that's when he runs away. Or well, he doesn't run away. He drags his leg away.
did they start using prosthetics on the face or makeup? It was a pretty
I don't
convincing
think so.
low makeup job to obscure that eye and make him look unbalanced,
Yeah,
unhinged.
I think they might have used some makeup when they had the first guy, but I didn't think that they were using makeup as much as he just had a very good job contorting his face. I could be wrong. I don't even know what kind of prosthetics they would have had available back then to make it look like that.
Yeah, we've had rubber for a long time. The Elephant Man. That probably came later.
Yeah, so I don't know.
I don't remember.
I can see it either way though. I don't think it was major prosthetics if it was any, but. So, anyways, they show a scene. It's now nighttime. There's two kids. And I'm not sure how these two kids got there, but they got two very different goals.
Yep.
So she's wanting to have some fun. And he's wanting to play with his ants. Literally, play with his ants.
This guy is cut from the same tree as Victor Frankenstein. I'm just going to say it.
Not in the last movie.
Well, hold on now. Young Victor. Not fooling around with Justine the maid Victor, but young Victor when his Aunt Sophie tries to marry him off at young Elizabeth. You know, he kind of, I got work to do, kiddo. But in
But
case
one
we
does
forget,
wonder how they. Go ahead.
there's another old lady who tries to get Victor romantically connected in this movie. That was an awkward little scene. I guess it comes back into play in a few moments here for the climax, but
A little bit. I think they were just making. I think most of that was just they were alluding to the fact that he was taking away their rich clients.
yeah.
But yeah, no, the old lady does make another appearance.
The Countess.
So she is so the girl is frustrated with his anting around, and she leaves. And immediately, Carl finds her, kills her. Unclear whether or not he eats her.
Kind of
And then
came out of
the little
nowhere,
boy,
didn't it?
so she yells. The little boy shrieks like a girl, scares Kigor, and he runs off. But yeah, it came out. No, it was a pretty quick scene. Like, yeah, and it was kind of the equivalent of Frankenstein and the kid at the lake in terms of like I think what they were trying to establish with it was the dangerous part, or maybe not the lake, but from the last movie in the woods with the old man, but established that
Which
he's
is
full heel, can't control himself. Watch your children, watch your wives. He's gonna come eat them.
hide your wife, hide your kids.
Yep.
But again, just like the previous movie, this fatality doesn't have a whole lot of weight for the rest of the movie.
No, it's a plot point. Purely a plot point.
But even then, I don't think it pays off at all.
It's not needed. I will say it's amusing to see the kid want to play with the ants, or the teenager, older teenager. But he's really the one that should have got it.
Fair enough.
She should have whacked him with a stick. Say, go play with your ants. And then or poured some ants down his pants, let him run off, and then he gets eaten by Carl.
Fair enough.
All right, so then Frankenstein or Stein and Hans are in their little carriage, and they get stopped by the police. And they say, "Oh, we're stopping everybody to check on him. We got a dead body up here." And they're like, "Oh,
we want
maybe
you
we
to
can help you out
identify
here."
it.
Yeah, so they come and look at the body. They hear that the person who killed them may or may not have been a man. So they start wondering what's going on with Carl. Is he reverting?
They were already wondering that because they already found a dead body. But
and a foot. But yeah. So I guess the Bond girl, has gone to a party.
I don't think it's her.
The lady we were just referring to is at.
Maybe it is. I thought that was Vera.
The lady there, but
I thought the Countess, that was her daughter Vera that she tried to hook up Frankenstein with at the beginning of the movie. Maybe it is Margaret. I don't know.
I think they're different people, but I think they were all at the same place. I should say that.
Okay. All right.
But anyways, Stein and Hans confront the Bond girl and say, "The last time you saw Carl, did he look like a freak?" And she says, "Nope." And then they start to leave. And then Kigor busts through the door or the window or whatever it was.
The window. Yeah, the creeper.
Yeah.
He's outside. You're right, that was Margaret because of that confrontation.
And then he sees he goes to the girl, but then he sees Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He charges up to him and you think he's gonna attack him, but he just wants help.
Yeah.
And
Poor guy.
He looks at him and he says, Frankenstein. Frankenstein.
Oh, everybody knows that name. Everybody knows the name Frankenstein.
But I guess he hadn't eaten enough because he just dies. It's not really clear why. No injury.
What a disappointing end to that. It was going along, but the movie still has a little bit more to go. That's something.
It does. So the council meets, and the question is this man Frankenstein or not?
The Inquisition.
And yeah. It's kind of an awkward spot here. I don't think this was the best pacing of the movie.
Well, as Billy Bob Thornton used to say, when the monster is dead, the movie is over. But in this case, no, it keeps going a bit.
Yeah, I think they could have just so at that point, Frankenstein says, or Stein says, "I'm gonna go. I'll just talk to him, and we'll see if they have no evidence." I think they could have just skipped right to where they're interviewing Stein and Hans. I don't think they needed this middle spot. Then basically, Stein says, "Yes, my name's Frankenstein. If your name was Frankenstein, you think you'd open up shop in this town using your real name?" Which is actually pretty plausible.
He gave the same argument to Hans earlier, but Hans really pressed him on it, and his pride just forced him to come clean.
Well, and I think Hans had seen him before too, like personally.
Yes,
like he knew what he looked like. So
they don't have a photograph in 1860 handy.
No. So then they do what they should have done earlier and go dig up the grave, and then they find the priest.
See,
They said,
Victor
"Oh,
should have
she said
attended.
get evidence. We got evidence."
Victor should have thought of this earlier. Putting something believable in that coffin. All the stuff he had to work with.
All you do is take the priest hat out.
You know it's got to be beheaded, and it just so long as it doesn't look like a priest, everything will be fine.
Yeah. Well, he does something even more stupid. After the whole city finds out he's Frankenstein, he goes back to the infirmary to work
It's
on his
God's
20 or
calling
so
on
people.
his life, man. He's got to do that work.
Yeah, I couldn't. And then they get all upset. And I can't tell if they're throwing liquor bottles or piss bottles. And they beat him with a bunch of sticks, basically.
I don't
And he looks
understand why
pretty
they're
dead.
so angry at him.
Because he's been cutting off their body parts.
Well, they don't know the details of this. Do you think I guess the whole country knows about the legend of Frankenstein, so I got to remember that. It's not like it was
They
just
also
some
know,
secret rumor.
you also have to remember that Carl was in public. So they're mad. Ernest, the janitor, goes and tells Hans, "Hey man, they're killing the guy back there." So he walks in, and they kind of get off him, and he looks pretty dead at this point. Well, he's not quite, but and great makeup effects on Cushing for the next scene when he's trying to see if he can fix him.
He beat up.
Yeah, he's got a pretty messed up face. It looks good. He says, "You know what you have to do."
Yep.
He says, "Okay. I hope I'm good enough." And
the police are on their way.
Yeah. And he removes Stein's brain and very ungingerly places it in the can, just like they did with the last one. And he hides the brain in the room with the new body and gets back just in time for the police to show up.
Yep.
It's unclear whether or not he sewed up his head. I'm not really sure what's up with that.
He could fudge it because of all the head injuries. He could, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have scalpel detail there, but yeah. He's like, basically, they beat him half to death. I tried to save him. It didn't work. And they're like, okay, we'll take his body and we'll put it in an unhallowed ground, like it should have been the first time.
Well, then you wouldn't be able to dig it up the next time.
Then what city are we in now?
We are back in London town, where Jack the Ripper would have been hanging out, interestingly enough.
Yeah. And we kind of know what's going to happen here. They didn't hide what they were doing. But what very innovative name does he now go under?
Well, I've already said the surname. I don't remember the first name he would have been using.
Well, I don't think they said the first name.
Oh.
Dr. Frank. Spelled
Dr. Frank.
Franck. So he added the C.
He's now the assistant to Dr. Hans Cleve, right? Is that how it's being portrayed in this ending?
I'm not sure on that, but they're both there. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Now, we'll say that the new monster that they showed, I thought was a lot taller than Peter Cushing. And I don't remember the face looking like Peter Cushing. But the new creature is Peter Cushing with the arm tattoo.
It suggests that his face was cut off and reattached, which I don't know how Hans had the time, if it's an unmarked grave, nobody would have been paying too much attention to it security-wise. Could have taken the whole head.
Well, I don't know about that. I saw the scar along the top of his head where he put the brain in, but I didn't notice anything on the sides or the bottom. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just didn't catch it myself.
Well, we had to have Peter Cushing available for the next movie, so that's just the choice we got to make.
Yes, you have to uphold that loose continuity where you can do whatever you want anyways. Yep. So he's reborn. Appears to have made it through the preliminary process of getting used of the brain and used to the body. No evidence of cannibalism. I'm not sure that he really achieved any revenge, but it was the Revenge of Frankenstein.
Well, what was his stated goal in the revenge? Simply that he would never allow the world to be rid of him?
Well, I think it was tied to, it wasn't his, it's not my fault. That's his kind of MO. So the first one would have worked if the brain hadn't been damaged. And then they tried to kill me. but I'm going to get my revenge in the sense of I'm going to get it right this time, and you're going to have to acknowledge me, like Roman Reigns. Acknowledge me. It's his WrestleMania
Respect.
moment.
That's what it comes down to is respect. Make a name for yourself. Even if you have to change your name to make a name for yourself.
So I want to point out one other thing. Is Hammer Films stole something from us. We should have had a Cujo and Monkey Paw crossover film.
Yeah, that little doggy from the first movie.
We got a dog revived in the first film, which we now find is probably a cannibal dog. And we got the monkey, a living cannibal monkey. Like, oh my goodness, the possibilities.
Seems like a fan film needs to be made about that. The Franken dog. We have the Franken weenie from Tim Burton, but Franken up, Franken chimp,
Franken monkey.
Franken
Curious
monkey
George
versus
Strikes
Franken
Back.
pup.
The
Yeah.
Revenge of Curious George.
Ooh, I like it.
So, did you ever watch the old live action Hulk show? Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno.
It's been a lot of years since I've sat through a complete episode, unfortunately. I have a lot of respect for it, and I like that approach to the character, but
I feel like Peter Cushing is Bill Bixby. Like, they could have made a television show of this. They could have the Walking Man theme song and everything. Victor going down the road with his backpack. Sad music in the background. Do 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 do.
So every town he goes to, he starts working in poor hospitals. Is that?
Look, I think the 3-year gap between The Curse of Frankenstein and The Revenge of Frankenstein could be the television series. He's learning how to do what he does in this movie. We can see him put the brain of the frog into the pig or whatever it was. We could see him learn about the cannibalistic monkeys.
Yeah. Even though he's supposed to have been in the same town for 3 years. I get, another loose retcon. That's fine.
Absolutely. This show works. Who needs Dark Shadows?
Not me.
Got any closing thoughts on The Revenge of Frankenstein?
I do. Margaret makes a really bad decision to loosen those restraints. Now, she went up there to make sure this guy was not in agonizing pain. But if she sees a patient strapped down, there's probably a reason why he's strapped down. And she wants to loosen the restraints. Now, here's where I'm going with this. I know we have to set our movie up. People today and double doors. You know what I'm talking about? People today, when they try to unlock and open and relock double doors, for some reason, they always know how to open that middle part. They flip the little latches up, top and bottom. They flip it away from the lock. Now they can open both doors. Now it comes time to lock the door back. What do? They never flip those latches back into position. They think they can lock one door and it'll hold. No, all it takes is just some pulling on the door and that thing comes open. I'm surrounded by idiots. That's... Lock your double doors, people. Put your latches back into the locking position.
So, let me say this. And we can make a more general thing out of this. Who has worse people skills? Church kids or doctors? And here's my setup. You have the church kid in this movie do what you were just talking about and loosening the crazy guy's straps alone in a room with him.
The giant man, too.
Yeah, the giant man with scars across his head, who's obviously had brain work done.
Yeah.
And then you have the doctor, who they're treating the guy because he doesn't want to be a freak. Or looked at as if he was one. He gets the new body and says, "Oh, you're going to spend the rest of your life hanging out with your old body, being looked at like a freak." And he thinks that's going to go well.
Quite the
seesaw. So which one's stupider?
These two should have been a couple. They deserve each other. But Hans is still loyal to the doctor.
Whew. Surrounded by idiots.
Well, poor Dr. Stein, Dr. Franken. He just wants to make his own guy. is continually beset by incompetence.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyways, that has been The Revenge of Frankenstein from 1958 from Hammer Films. It's been fun, Adam.
Oh, yes.
I'm glad you're not an idiot.
Well, I have been on occasion, but hopefully not in a permanent state to live there. I try not to live there, only visit sometimes.
Well, I hope you find yourself not to be surrounded with too many of them. Hope you have a good week. And
Check
I forget
your doors,
the name of the next
people.
movie. Yeah,
Evil
check your doors.
of Frankenstein.
Evil. So the Evil of Frankenstein is next. All right. And if I remember correctly, I don't have quite as fond memories of that one.
Yeah.
But I'll be reminded as I watch it later this week. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.